The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
I believed in this vision. I believed in the group. I believe in America.
A major win for the White House, the mega bill victory lap in Washington, and how it will actually impact everyday Americans. Plus, President Trump seemingly picks up another win in his war on the media. The settlement payment CBS is doling out and why many legal experts are surprised. Kohberger and Diddy, the top trials captivating the nation. Our legal expert joins us to discuss where these cases could go next. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We are so glad you're here with us. I'm Dee Gatton, and on this weekend edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week, and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. 2 of the nation's most watched court cases come to a close. A new jobs report shows the economy is holding strong, and a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas appears to be close. Plus, the first set of illegal immigrants arrive at Alligator Alcatraz. But first, Republicans in Congress gave themselves a July 4th deadline to pass the president's massive tax and spending bill, but the hours leading up to their self-imposed deadline were filled with political drama. National correspondent Matt Gelka reports from Capitol Hill.
The motion is adopted.
The one big beautiful bill in Congress ended up meeting the July 4th deadline. But leading up to it, House Republicans worked all night to try and flip members of their own party who had concerns about the tax and spending plan. 5 GOP holdouts had opposed advancing the bill to a final vote, with concerns centering around spending and how much the bill adds to the national debt. The president piled on via Truth Social, writing in part just after midnight, "What are the Republicans waiting for? What are you trying to prove? MAGA is not happy, and it's costing you votes." He also made 1 a.m. phone calls.
The president's very engaged. He was, very helpful in the process. He helped answer questions and articulate his vision and what this bill will mean for the country and his agenda and how urgent it is for us to get it done. So I think it was very helpful. I'm really appreciative of his leadership.
The pressure campaign worked, and enough Republicans got in line to advance the bill for a final vote.
The resolution is adopted,
including Kentucky's Thomas Massie, a fiscal hawk who said he'd support advancing it if Trump stopped publicly attacking him, according to The Hill. He ultimately was a no on the final bill.
I think what those holdouts were doing was exactly what we were all doing. We are advocating for our district. I think, 3 in the morning, after having several conversations with each other and the president, we've concluded that this is the best, most conservative bill that we can put on the floor to pass for the American people.
Democrats said they were united in opposition to the bill, with an all-day, record-breaking filibuster from House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries used as a last-ditch effort to further delay the final vote.
It's a crime scene going after the health and the safety and the well-being of the American people. And, Mr. Speaker, we want no part of it.
Some conservatives with concerns about the bill said they held out as long as they could to push for changes. The House, however, did not make any formal changes to the bill the Senate sent to them. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries set a record for the longest House speech before the vote on the spending bill. Jeffries spoke for 8 hours and 44 minutes in opposition of the bill.
And as a result of the lack of health care that will result directly from this one big ugly bill, people in America will die. Unnecessary deaths.
The previous record was held by former Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who spoke for over 8 hours in 2021 against President Biden's Build Back Better legislation. While the White House celebrates the passage of the big, beautiful bill, many Americans are still left questioning what it means for them. Earlier this week, I broke down the details. Trump's bill includes hundreds of provisions, including extended and expanded tax cuts, as well as cuts to Medicaid, food benefits, and other programs. A bigger piece of the legislation is the child tax credit, which will increase from $2,000 to $2,200 next year. Another provision was a key campaign promise: no tax on tips. Workers can deduct up to $25,000 per year from 2025 through 2028. And there's also Trump accounts, a one-time $1,000 credit per child born between 2025 through 2028. The bill also boosts the standard deduction by $750 for 2025. Couples filing jointly will see a $1,500 increase. New work requirements, they'll be implemented for Medicaid. An estimated 18 million people will have to prove they spend at least 80 hours a month working, volunteering, or going to school. The bill also expands work requirements for SNAP benefits. The president visited Iowa on Thursday, kicking off a year-long celebration to mark 250 years of American independence. It will be an event in America's heartland, kicking off the beginning of patriotic festivities. The centerpiece of the celebration will be the Great American State Fair at the Iowa State Fairgrounds to showcase every state in the union. Trump also shared other festivities in the coming year. Take a listen.
We're going to have a UFC fight. Think of this, on the grounds of the White House. We have a lot of land there. We're going to build a little, we're not, Dana's going to do it. Dana's great, one of a kind. We're going to have a UFC fight, championship fight, full fight, like 20, 25,000 people.
Trump also signed an executive order to increase entry fees for foreign tourists visiting national parks to help improve infrastructure across the nation. Reports out of the Middle East suggest Hamas might be open to the U.S. proposed ceasefire deal with Israel. President Trump hasn't provided exact details, but several outlets report the terms of the deal. They include 10 living and 18 deceased hostages released in stages over a 60-day halt in fighting. The National News Desk, Kayla Gaskins, discussed the deal with Danny Danon, Israel's ambassador to the UN.
Accepted many compromises. This deal is not perfect. We have to release murderers in order to allow more hostages to come back, but we accepted that.
Israel remains under heavy pressure from President Trump to take steps to secure peace in Gaza as Netanyahu prepares to visit Washington this coming Monday. Israel says Hamas cannot continue to exist. Hamas refuses to exile itself. Ukraine is moving forward with plans for joint weapons production with some international allies. It comes after the U.S. announced it's halting certain shipments of missiles and ammunition previously promised to Ukraine under the Biden administration. A U.S. official says the decision was made after a Pentagon review found U.S. stocks on some of the pledged items were too low. Also, the Trump administration is lifting restrictions on chip design software exports to China amid recent trade negotiations. This comes after China signaled it would export rare earth shipments in return for the U.S. canceling restrictive measures against Beijing last week. In May, several companies said the U.S. was requiring them to get licenses to sell software for semiconductors and other goods to China. The first detainees have arrived at Florida's Immigration Detention Center in the Everglades. It is the facility that officials have dubbed Alligator Alcatraz. Florida's Attorney General says it will house criminal illegal aliens before they are sent back to their home countries. The center will have a capacity of about 3,000 detainees. Environmental groups have protested against the center, saying it's a threat to the fragile ecosystem of the Everglades. CBS and its parent company, Paramount, have agreed to pay $16 million set to go to President Trump's foundation for his future presidential library. As national correspondent Christine Frizzell reports, it's part of a lawsuit. Many legal experts predicted Trump had little chance of winning.
We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States.
The lawsuit centers on this interview that aired on CBS's 60 Minutes a few weeks before the 2024 election. But a longer, more rambling response to the question was played on CBS's Face the Nation, prompting Donald Trump to accuse the network of deceptive editing and, quote, election interference.
She gave an answer that was so bad that they changed it They took it out, threw it out.
CBS said the response was simply cut down for time, a common practice.
You know, we're probably going to sue them just for the hell of it.
In a statement, CBS head George Cheek said settlement allows companies to focus on their core mission.
He's saying their core objectives are not, in fact, the news. Because if the core objective of CBS was the news, they would keep litigating. The core objective of CBS is to generate revenue.
CBS parent company Paramount is hoping to merge with the company Skydance, which needs the approval of Trump's Federal Communications Commission. Senator Ron Wyden accusing Paramount of paying Trump a bribe for merger approval. Other critics blasting another agreement, the release of complete transcripts by 60 Minutes with future presidential candidates.
It's an unconstitutional idea, and it really makes the Trump administration look officious and look like it's a totalitarian leadership when it attacks the freedom of the press to this point.
The settlement, $16 million, the same amount as one with ABC News, after anchor George Stephanopoulos said Trump had been found liable for rape in a civil suit, which he hadn't. ABC recently firing longtime reporter Terry Moran after a series of posts on X critical of President Trump and his advisor, Stephen Miller. So far, lawsuits have earned the president $67 million for his presidential library, and there are indications more may be coming. He's now threatened to sue CNN and the New York Times for publishing articles about leaked intelligence, which said that recent attack by the U.S. on Iran had only set the country's nuclear program back by a couple months. I'm Christine Frizzau for the National News Desk.
Coming up next year on the National News Desk, the unconventional new plan to combat flesh-eating flies, terrorizing farmers and their livestock. And the Sean Diddy Combs verdict is in. The punishment the rap mogul could face following the high-profile case. The Wisconsin abortion battle has finally come to an end after more than 3 years of legal disputes. The state's high court ruled that an 1849 law does not equate to an abortion ban. This means abortion procedures may continue in the state. The legislation criminalized anyone other than the mother or doctor in a medical emergency to destroy an unborn child. Wisconsin was in a legal gray area after the 2022 overturning of Roe v. Wade, which ended federal constitutional protections for terminating a pregnancy. And with decisions back in the hands of states, Wisconsin sued to invalidate the state's ban. However, some state prosecutors said they wanted to enforce the law. A verdict and a guilty plea. The world watched as two high-profile cases, the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking trial and the Idaho quadruple murder case, captivated millions. Earlier, I sat down with criminal defense attorney Steve Greenberg to discuss. A lot to talk about. Let's start with the Sean Diddy Combs verdict. Does the outcome mean that the defense, in your opinion, adequately argued the interactions laid out in this trial were consensual?
Well, they obviously must have. You know, the prosecution had a lot of problems because there was a great volume of text messages in this case showing that things were consensual. There were a lot of text messages with Cassie and with Jane showing that they were willing participants in what came to be called these freak-offs. In fact, Cassie was oftentimes arranging things on her own. I think the government overreached a little bit on this case. They got into a relationship, and they're trying to take federal criminal statutes, and they're saying that we're going to criminalize a person's relationship. I was critical of this prosecution all along. Look, are there toxic relationships that we want to criticize? Yes. Is P. Diddy a bad guy? Yes. Is domestic violence bad? Yes. But should we make it a federal criminal case and say, you should go to jail for 15 years for a relationship that was largely consensual, although there are parts of it that we find disgusting? Probably not. I think that's what the jurors said.
And as we've talked about before, from the very beginning, the defense laid out, they were honest about his client and talked about the domestic violence. So I wonder that impact that had on the jury. And looking at sentencing, will the fact that Diddy didn't profit from the prostitution make a difference?
I don't think that makes a difference, but the federal sentencing guidelines, they're very interesting. You know, they're a point system, and the government, as we saw yesterday when he tried to get out on bond, and the defense have very different views. So the judge is going to have to add up the points, and the prosecution wants the judge to still penalize him for the things that he was acquitted on, and they want the judge to penalize him for the violence. Now, the judge said yesterday, your lawyers admitted you're a violent man, so I'm not going to let you out on bond on this case. It'll be interesting to see if he takes that into account when he sentences him. The sentencing guidelines, according to the defense, come in somewhere around 18 months to 2 years. Typically, a first-time offender gets sentenced under the sentencing guidelines. So Diddy would get out right away. The government thinks that he should get around 4 or 5 years. Then he won't get out right away, and they want consecutive time. That's never going to happen.
Remains to be seen, but it is something that we're watching. I want to ask you, before I let you go, about the quadruple murder case in Idaho. Brian Kohberger received 4 consecutive life sentences. Is this a win for the prosecution?
Look, if 4 people died, it's not a win for anybody. I mean, I think the win here is that the families aren't going to have to sit through a trial and hear the horrific details. As much as we heard some of the families wanted to see him get the death penalty, I think that at the end of the day, they're going to realize that sitting through a trial and hearing about what happened to their loved ones would not have been a pleasant experience, and that they're better off with this. And I have always been of the belief that spending the rest of your life in prison is far worse than the death penalty.
Families will be able to give victim impact statements. We understand Kohberger will be sentenced later this month. I'm sure we'll check in with you before then. Criminal defense attorney Steve Greenberg, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Have a safe holiday.
The U.S. has an unconventional yet proven method to combat the spread of flesh-eating flies. Breathe them. The government project involves sterilizing and releasing billions of adult males out of airplanes to breed with wild female ones. When the females lay eggs, they don't hatch. This specific breed, the New World screwworm fly, feeds on live flesh, thus posing a large risk to wildlife, livestock, and even household pets. Looking at the photos, I just have to take a shower. So gross. NASA's Curiosity rover just drilled into a brand new region of Mars and uncovered new evidence that there might have been life on Mars. Emma Withrow, the fact check team, joining us now. Always fascination on this topic. What did they find?
Yeah, so the rovers reached kind of a fascinating patch of Mars where boxwork patterns is what they're calling them. These like crisscrossing ridge are etched into the landscape like puzzle pieces kind of. So these features were created not by surface water, but probably by groundwater that was seeping through rock cracks billions of years ago. And according to NASA, the discovery suggests that even after Mars lost its surface lakes and rivers, water might have still existed underground, possibly creating a stable environment for microbial life.
I mean, that would make sense. So the surface was basically drying out, but something, you know,
underneath
still
was
happening.
still going on,
Underneath.
Yeah, I know it is interesting. They also talked about the fact that the Curiosity, which is the name of the rover, drilled a rock sample in this region nicknamed Altadena, and it's currently analyzing the material for organic molecules or other signs that the surface might have once been habitable. So we're gonna have to wait and see the data that comes out, but definitely an interesting new discovery.
Yeah, we'll be following it. Emma, thank you.
Thanks.
Later on, Emma will be back to join us to break down the rock's chemistry and why it's raising eyebrows. Coming up, outrage at a video showing a chaotic clash with cops in New York, how the police department is responding, plus a California city's first genealogy-based serial rapist case. We'll be back in 90 seconds. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Maryland, where a house is completely destroyed after an explosion.
Well, Baltimore County fire officials confirmed that no one was home during the explosion, which of course is a huge relief. The family is believed to be on vacation, but when they come home, they'll be coming back to this devastation. Just horrible. Essentially, only the foundation of the home is left, pieces of the home and debris scattered all across this neighborhood, even damaging the home to the right of us. And also going across the street where we are behind the police line, you can see pieces of the home also all the way here across the street. So obviously very heartbreaking, but at least no one was hurt. But we do know that this investigation is active and ongoing.
This case is not just about today's arrests. It's about achieving the justice for the 5 Fresno women that we know about who Flores encountered in public and later forcibly raped.
After 5 years of relentless detective work, Fresno Police Chief Mindy Castro says they've made a breakthrough in a string of sexual assault cases. On Tuesday morning, 55-year-old accused serial rapist Cesar Flores was arrested at a trailer park near Church and Indianola Avenue in Fresno County. And for the first time in Fresno, investigators used forensic genealogy to crack the case.
We're hopeful by sharing his image and sending the message he's off the streets. Any additional victims will be encouraged to come forward.
Rochester police answering questions concerning cell phone videos shared on social media of a chaotic scene involving officers and members of the public.
Our officers got there and we immediately encountered a hostile crowd. So you had dozens of people out on the street, on Locust Street, being verbally assaultive at our officers, yelling at the officers because they didn't want us to take the mini bike.
RPD says since the unregistered bike was illegally operated and involved in a crash, it's their responsibility to impound it.
And we asked him, can he get the bike? And he said, back the F up. And then he came out here and it just got loud. And everybody just started going off.
Rochester police say the incident and officer response is under review at the section level, so they're waiting to release the body-worn camera video.
Coming up next, a string of urgent recalls forcing drivers in park. The popular models now being pulled off the streets. Plus, finding your soulmate through alleged manipulation and coercion. The online company now under investigation. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now. Kate Middleton made a rare and candid comment about the difficulty of navigating life after her cancer journey. The Princess of Wales announcing her diagnosis in March 2024, revealing she was undergoing chemotherapy treatment. Also, Michael Madsen, star of dozens of hit films and known for his work with Quentin Tarantino, has died at age 67. Early reports indicate he died of cardiac arrest. Those stories and much more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. State and federal authorities in Michigan are investigating Twin Flames, an online company that's been accused of running a cult-like organization in recent documentaries. Michigan's Attorney General said that the search warrants were conducted at 2 homes where Twin Flames universe is based. The company, operated by Jeff and Shayla Devine, offers to help people find their lifelong partner or twin flame through a spiritual journey. The AG claims there are allegations that Twin Flames is using coercive control over its members through illegal acts. Also, Nissan plans to recall over 400,000 vehicles due to engine defects, which could lead to car crashes. This recall affects various models, including the 2021 to 24 Rogue and 2022 Infiniti QX55. The company said dealers will repair or replace affected engines for free. Drivers can contact Nissan's customer service line directly with any questions. At the same time, Ford is recalling over 200,000 vehicles due to a rear-view camera malfunction. The recall includes the Ford Transit Connect, Lincoln Continental, F-150, and others. Expect notices to start rolling out by the end of the month. Dealers will update the camera software for free. Coming up in our next half hour, Waffle House makes a menu change. Why the popular chain's latest move could lead to a lower tab on your next breakfast. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected. During a pivotal moment for the president's economic agenda, Trump doubling down. The Federal Reserve resistance now showing signs of getting in line. Plus, outsmarting the economy. 13 recession-proof careers that don't require a bachelor's degree.
I think they're going to say it's a backdoor to a nationwide injunction.
And the limits of presidential power being tested once again. How federal judges may be finding a way around a recent Supreme Court ruling. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dee Gatton, and we begin with President Trump continuing to put pressure on the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates when it meets next at the end of the month. The president specifically going after Fed Chair Jerome Powell, who he originally appointed to the job in his first term, calling him too late, Powell. Powell now responding to the criticism. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar reports from Washington.
At this pivotal moment for President Trump's economic agenda, with the tax and spending package in flux in Congress,
the amendment is agreed to,
and trade deal deadlines days away, he's doubling down on his criticism of Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell.
The president sent this note to the Fed chair. It says, Jerome, you are as usual too late. You have cost the USA a fortune and continue to do so. You should lower the rate by a lot. Hundreds of billions of dollars are being lost, and there is no inflation.
Congress assigns the Federal Reserve two mandates: maximum employment and price stability. Interest rates are one of the few tools they have to get it done. The unemployment rate is historically low at 4.2%, and the Fed's North Star for measuring inflation is just above their 2% target. Powell making news Tuesday when asked about the impact of the president's tariff policies.
In effect, we went on hold when we saw the size of the tariffs and essentially all inflation forecasts for the United States went up materially as a consequence of the tariffs.
The president claims he's proven those forecasts wrong, but also says this about his tariffs, the bulk of which are temporarily reduced to 10% until July 9th.
They haven't even kicked in yet.
The president's ire has been directed at Powell, but he does not get to make unilateral decisions about interest rates. Whether rates go up, down, or stay the same is decided by 12 voting members of the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC, that meets 8 times a year. Powell's term as chair ends next May. His potential replacement, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, weighing in.
They made a lot of mistakes in 2022 by waiting too long to hike, and maybe they're doing the mirror image of that by waiting too long to cut.
Powell also said the majority of the FOMC believes it will be appropriate to cut rates later this year. When asked about the president's personal attacks, Powell said he's just focused on doing his job. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
A better than expected jobs report this week points to a resilient labor market. U.S. employers added 147,000 jobs in June, and unemployment ticked down to 4.1%. Wall Street is reacting positively to the news, with the major indexes all seeing steady gains on what's already been a strong week for the markets. Microsoft confirms it plans to lay off close to 9,000 employees. That's less than 4% of its workforce. It is the third round of job cuts in recent months and the biggest purge since 2023. The Xbox division reportedly took the biggest hit. Microsoft says the cuts aren't performance-based, but are necessary to best position the company for success in a dynamic marketplace. As the economy remains rocky and recession fears loom, many workers are having a hard time finding a stable job. A new study from Live Career has identified 13 recession-proof careers that don't require a bachelor's degree. Some popular options include office or medical assistants, firefighters, dental hygienists, heating and air mechanics, and truck drivers. Each role has an annual salary of $50,000 and are projected to grow by at least 4% by 2032. New developments. The Environmental Protection Agency has put about 140 employees on administrative leave for 2 weeks. This comes days after the employees signed a public letter critical of the agency. They raised concerns about the treatment of federal employees and the Trump administration's climate and public health regulations. The agency said it is conducting an administrative investigation into the employees. The Department of Homeland Security plans to cut about 750 workers from its intelligence arm. That's nearly 3/4 of the full-time employees at that office. However, the timing of those cuts is still unclear as the reductions were put on hold due to rising global tensions. The decision has raised concerns among the nation's police and intelligence gathering agencies. As we take a look at new fallout from last week's ruling by the Supreme Court, barring federal judges from issuing nationwide injunctions. Those are essentially court orders that prevent the federal government from implementing a policy or law. This week, we saw a judge rule once again against a White House policy under a different name. National correspondent Christine Frizzell digs into the details.
President Donald Trump has called the past use of nationwide injunctions by federal judges a, quote, colossal abuse of power.
If any one of the nearly 700 federal judges disagreed with the policy of a duly elected president of the United States, he or she could block that policy from going into effect or at least delay it for many years.
The Supreme Court last week handing him a victory, limiting the power of federal courts to use these injunctions. During this term, the vast majority have come from just 5 districts: Maryland, Massachusetts, California, Washington State, and Washington, D.C.
Think about that, 94 districts. And 35 out of the 40 opinions with nationwide injunctions came from 5 liberal districts in this country.
This week, a federal judge, once again in Washington, D.C., did block another Trump policy, this one barring migrants who cross the southern border from seeking asylum in the United States. The judge insisted the president violated immigration laws passed by Congress, identifying asylum seekers as a group or class of people, part of a class action lawsuit and not a nationwide injunction.
I think on the merits, the case has real legs. The problem is I don't think a court of appeals is going to let the fact that it's a class action. I think they're going to say it's a backdoor to a nationwide injunction.
Before the 1960s, nationwide injunctions were extremely rare. There were 64 during President Donald Trump's first term. Critics say because he pushed the boundaries of the law far more than his predecessors.
This is the playbook that Trump has been using. Do things that are unconstitutional and illegal, and then essentially hope that it's going to go through. So judges have had to step in and say, no, we have to stop this for everybody, not just for a group.
Within hours of this week's ruling from the federal judge, the Trump administration filed an appeal. The judge also postponed his ruling from taking effect for 2 weeks. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
Earlier this year, the Department of Homeland Security flipped the script on the CBP One app. In the Biden administration, it was used as a way for immigrants to claim asylum and be processed upon arrival to the U.S. Well, now it's known as CBP Home, and it's a way to check out, so to speak. DHS offers cost-free travel, fine forgiveness, and $1,000 to self-deporting migrants. Border czar Tom Homan believes close to 60,000 people have taken them up on the offer.
We got to do more in the CBP Home app. The people who signed up for it is increasing every day, and I think they're increasing because they see these nationwide enforcement operations. They know we can either search you out, find you, and deport you formally, which places a bar against you coming back.
Bans can range from 5 years to forever. The administration says it welcomes immigrants who go through the legal process of obtaining a work visa or through a relative citizen petition. Homan believes a lot of people are leaving without using the app and says about 1 million people have left since President Trump returned to office. South Korea's president says the country may not be able to reach a mutual trade agreement by President Trump's deadline. President Lee Jae-myung says both countries are still determining their specific demands. President Trump's 90-day tariff pause will end next week. South Korea would face a 25% base tariff and potentially higher duties on critical exports like cars and semiconductors. The Southern breakfast chain Waffle House announced it is officially dropping its 50-cent surcharge on eggs from its menu. The slightly higher tab went in effect in February when the nation saw massive egg shortages and sky-high prices thanks to a bird flu outbreak. Although egg prices are falling back to normal levels, retail prices were still up more than 40% in May from a year ago. Denny's dropped its own surcharge in late May. A new region on Mars is presenting NASA scientists with a geological mystery. The Curiosity rover has entered unfamiliar terrain, and what it's finding is unlike anything seen elsewhere on the red planet. Emma Withrow for the Fact Check team joining us now. Okay, you piqued my interest. What did the Curiosity rover find?
Yeah, so the rover, it rolled onto this area of Mars called Mount Sharp, and they've said that it has something that scientists have really never seen before. They're called boxwork ridges. What they are, they're low crisscrossing formations that stretch all the way across the landscape. So first of this type of discovery so far.
Yeah, and from what I'm hearing, it's significant, but a lot more research is still needed.
Definitely, yeah. It's going to come in time, I'm sure. But this pattern really only appears here, nowhere else on the mountain, even after 11 years of exploring this area. So the rover's lead scientist at NASA's lab, they said that the team's trying to figure out why this spot is so different than everywhere else.
So what does this tell us about Mars? What are scientists specifically looking for?
Yeah, so the key finding here is that it kind of points to a transition period in Mars's past after surface water was gone, but then the underground water was still active. So this layer might have held clues to, how the planet changed from wet and possibly habitable to the dry desert that we kind of now see and think of today.
Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah,
Emma, thank you. Much more on this online. For more on the Fact Check team topic, including links to their sources, just scan that QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com. Still to come here, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from the passage of President Trump's big, beautiful bill to the uptick in global anti-Semitic incidents. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. President Trump receiving his wish, his tax cut and spending bill approved by Congress just ahead of his July 4th deadline. National correspondent Matt Galka getting to the finish line took an unexpected amount of arm twisting by Trump and Republican leaders. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Steve, there were some out there who would argue that it was always going to be this way, right? A handful of Republicans were going to hem and haw and threaten not to vote for this bill so they could tell their constituents they fought for them before ultimately falling in line. Now, you can make the argument that is what happened here. There was a group of Republicans that had concerns about parts of this bill, whether it was cuts to Medicaid, whether it was because they were worried about the spending in the bill, how it was going to add to the national debt. But in the end, Republicans in the House and in the Senate got it done. They got enough people to get on board and ultimately vote for the one big, beautiful bill. Now, you mentioned the arm twisting, the wrangling. Not only did House Republican leadership have to sort of whip up their votes in their own conference, but it took a lot from President Trump also. Before the passage of the bill in the House, I mean, he was not only relentlessly posting on Truth Social, but he was also making late night phone calls, midnight, 1 a.m., for hours on end, trying to get members of the Republican Party to come around and support the bill. And ultimately, that's apparently what split some of them. You can hear from the House Speaker here talking about it now.
The president's very engaged. He was, very helpful in the process. He helped answer questions and articulate his vision and what this bill will mean for the country and his agenda and how urgent it is for us to get it done. So I think it was very helpful. I'm really appreciative of his leadership.
The House Republicans could only afford to lose 4 votes total if they wanted to advance the bill. They ended up losing 2 votes, so a thin margin, but they got it done. Meanwhile, Democrats, they couldn't really do much, but a notable moment for them, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries spoke for almost 9 hours in a filibuster to try and delay the final vote on this one. Maybe just symbolic because, again, they couldn't do much to stop its passing. But everything they could do, they tried before ultimately the bill got done.
Yep. Trump's backers adding this to the list of what they say is a long list of victories in Trump's first few months in office. Meanwhile, last week, the Supreme Court ended its term with a blockbuster ruling limiting federal judges' ability to use nationwide injunctions. This was seen as a victory for President Trump, who's had dozens of his policies halted via injunction. But national correspondent Christine Frizzau, that didn't stop a federal judge from blocking another Trump policy just a few days ago.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because it doesn't mean that President Trump can do whatever he wants. So this judge basically said that with an executive order from several months ago, President Trump said that no one is allowed to file for an asylum claim at the southern border. Well, the judge said he was violating a law passed by Congress, and therefore, you know, the separation of power was off. The judge, though, this was interesting because a lot of us were really surprised when we saw this ruling come down from this federal judge in Washington, D.C. But instead of calling it a nationwide injunction, he said that this group of people is a class, being the asylum seekers, and therefore it was not a nationwide injunction but a class action lawsuit. Now the Trump administration immediately appealed this. We expect it to go up the ranks again. One of the biggest complaints from Attorney General Pam Bondi is that, you know, of the 40 injunctions that have already been issued against Trump administration policies, 35 have come from just 5 states: Massachusetts, Maryland, California, Washington State, and then Washington, D.C., which she says, you know, are all liberal judges.
These injunctions have blocked our policies from tariffs to military readiness to immigration to foreign affairs, fraud, abuse, and many other issues. The judges have tried to seize the executive branch's power, and they cannot do that, no longer.
It's been really interesting to watch the Supreme Court, especially just in the last few months under President Trump. They seem to, time and time again, defer to the fact that the executive or the president has more power than we previously thought. It's going to be very interesting as we continue to see these battles play out, especially as it relates to the judicial, legislative, and executive branch.
National correspondent Christine Frizzau, thank you. Meanwhile, across the globe, statistics show that the number of anti-Semitic incidents are up in recent years. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, this past week you spoke to Israel's ambassador to the UN about this. What did he tell you?
I did, Steve, and he said that this is a problem that they're seeing, yes, on the streets. They're seeing this in cities like Paris and to Mexico City, to New York City. But Ambassador Danny Danon, that's Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, says he's even seeing it at the UN.
Well, you know, since October 7th, we saw the rise of anti-Semitism. We saw it in the streets of New York City, of Washington, D.C., but also in the halls of the United Nations. Senior UN official, his name is Tom Fletcher. He's in charge of all the humanitarian work of the UN. He came to the Security Council, and he blamed Israel for killing 14,000 babies. That was a lie, and then he had to retract this lie. No, those words are dangerous because they are incite people to go to the streets.
And we also asked the ambassador what he makes of the Trump administration's very heavy-handed approach to attempting to curb reports of rising anti-Semitism at American universities. He says that it does appear to be working. He is supportive of the Trump administration's take when it comes to some elite schools like Harvard, like Columbia University, like Cornell, and Steve, the list goes on and on. But he is very passionate about this issue and hopes to see those surging numbers come down soon.
Right, and the president laser focused on that issue. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot about it over the coming months. Kayla, Christine, Matt, as always, great work. Thanks for your hard work. Back to you.
K-12 students will no longer be able to use phones in schools in Oregon. That's after the governor signed an executive order requiring all districts ban student cell phone use by October 31st. School districts will have full control over their ban as long as it prohibits devices during class time. Civil rights and labor groups are worried about the 2026 FIFA World Cup in the U.S. More than 80 groups sent a letter to FIFA expressing deep concern over immigration policies that could impact teams and spectators at the event next summer. The group cited 2 major concerns, one of which was President Trump's executive order banning visitors from 12 countries. The other concern being ongoing ICE raids. Coming up next, California businesses and business owners, they are frustrated at an increase in homeless encampments, the action they're now taking. Plus, a storm chaser's proposal that's gone viral on social media. What led up to the moment in 90 seconds? This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. And we start in California, where business owners are frustrated by a growing number of homeless encampments.
People camp out here, they're drugs. Some of them are not mentally fit, which I understand that, but they ask our people, our customers, for money and intimidation.
AJ Rasami, the Blackstone Merchants Association president, says he believes having nearby homeless shelters is unintentionally contributing to the problem in the area, drawing them into commercial spaces. Backed by nearly 100 signatures, the association has now submitted a formal petition to the city of Fresno about a pattern they say they've seen for months, that shelter workers are allegedly directing unhoused individuals to private properties.
An unusual sight here along Tropicana Boulevard between Eastern and Pecos.
In the 40 years that I've lived here, this has never happened.
As Mother Nature had her way, strong winds Tuesday afternoon, toppling trees, snapping light, and traffic poles, also causing power outages for hundreds in the area.
I don't know what tomorrow or what today's going to be like.
Uncertainty for Robert the cashier. No power means Speedy Mart can't reopen. Further down, cleanup efforts were on the agenda for county public works crews, which is good news for Kim, the neighbor.
But I did walk over here this morning trying to beat the rain because I did want to see the destruction. It does look like a lot of it's been cleaned up since yesterday.
What started out as a typical day for storm chasers Paige Berdamus and Bryce Shelton of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, became a life-changing one. See for yourself. They were chasing a system in South Dakota when Bryce saw something else forming, the perfect moment. Paige says she was taking selfies in front of an EF3 tornado when Bryce came over and told her to turn around. She did. He was on one knee. The proposal happened quietly on a live stream, but an hour later, a second tornado dropped and a friend captured the photo that's now gone viral. Huge congratulations to the happy couple. Still ahead, Netflix's newest partnership aimed at bringing outer space closer to you. And Dodgers pitcher Clayton Kershaw celebrates a major career milestone. Why his latest feat might never be topped again. NASA and Netflix are teaming up this summer to bring space closer to you. The space agency announced NASA Plus programming will be available to stream on Netflix. You'll have the option to watch rocket launches, astronaut spacewalks, and mission coverage. Programming and scheduling will be announced closer to the launch date. And the largest Martian meteor could sell for up to $4 million at auction later this month. Check it out. At 54 pounds, this meteor is one of 400 Martian meteorites ever found on Earth. Data reveals the rock was most likely blasted into space due to an asteroid impact on Mars' surface. That impact was so powerful, parts of the rock turned to glass. The auction will begin on July 16th. Los Angeles Dodgers Clayton Kershaw hit a career milestone on Wednesday, recording his 3,000th strikeout. Kershaw becomes the 20th pitcher in MLB history to reach that milestone. He reached number 3,000 at the last possible moment for the final out against the Chicago White Sox in the 6th. Kershaw also became the 4th left-hander to garner the feat. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check our local listings. And you can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week.